Good morning. I'm very happy this morning to welcome my parents here at Assembly. They've flown in from Boston to help us out with the kids during the unfortunate confluence of my Toad Week and Monica Ross's Vacation Week. And I'm very, the faculty all laughed at that. And I'm very glad to get the chance to visit with them. You can see them up in the back over there. Everyone can turn around and look. You can see my mom's the lady who looks sort of like me, and my dad's the guy next to her who looks sort of like a cross between me and Walter White from Breaking Bad. These past few weeks, I've been thinking a lot about Jack Hyler, who is one of the most powerful mentors that I've had the pleasure of knowing. Jack's influence on me wasn't about academics or horses or teaching so much as it was about how I want to live my life. He believed in working hard, honoring his family, enjoying every moment, holding himself and others to a high standard, living life to a soundtrack, and most importantly, expressing gratitude. I've never heard anybody say thank you as often as Jack Hyler did. Today I have a pretty rare opportunity to give a talk in front of a bunch of people about any subject that I want with my parents in the audience. I told them that I was going to be giving an entirely different imaginary talk about deadlines and how they can help motivate you to do your best work, but that was just a maneuver to make sure that they showed up this morning. My parents guided me effectively through all kinds of tough times, demanding my best and encouraging my passions. Most importantly, they always made sure I felt loved and supported. For those reasons, and inspired by Uncle Jack and his exemplary gratitude, I'm going to attempt this morning to repay unto them some small fraction of the embarrassment that my parents caused me when I was a kid.
It doesn't have to end here.
My dad has always modeled for me what it means to be a good man. Through his example, he showed me that true masculinity stems not from typical caveman garbage, like physical strength, financial dominance, or the willingness to bully people into submission, but rather through the confidence born of lifelong dedication to two tasks: doing the right thing and pursuing and achieving excellence. My dad taught me persistence. The easy way out was unacceptable in our house because anything worth trying was also worth practicing and working at and honing towards perfection. As a professional jazz musician, he worked nights and weekends, which meant I was able to spend a lot of time with him after school and during the summers. Instead of just setting me up to play on my own, he was always engaged with me, challenging me to master a new game, encouraging me to build a more complex and well-engineered structure, hauling me along on a camping or fishing trip, pushing me to iron out every last missed note in a difficult piece of piano music, nudging me to come outside with him and throw a baseball, teaching me about math and science and language and literature. I relished this time hanging out and playing with my dad. He's the most knowledgeable musician I know, but in addition to his musical expertise, he's well read on 100 different subjects, from electronics to poetry, from parenting to car repair. He taught himself carpentry and rebuilt half our house himself, as well as handcrafting the bass that some of you have seen me play from time to time. Modeling myself after my dad, I aspire to someday be a Renaissance man, interested and knowledgeable and skilled in many different fields. Most of all, though, I love my dad because he's just a good and decent man and a great father, and I'm proud to be his son. Then there's my mom, the hardest working, kindest person I know. Every weekday throughout my life, my mom has left for the office early in the morning and come home in the middle of dinner totally exhausted. On weekends, she tackles an endless list of Sisyphean projects around the house: yard work and grocery shopping and taxes and on and on. I now realize that when I was a kid, working so hard to make ends meet, she must have always been tired, always been stressed. But stressed and tired is not how my mom has ever appeared to me. An eternal optimist, my mom is sunny and fun and cheerful and graceful. Her love of people, and most of all her love for her family, crackles through all her personal interactions. She always made plenty of space and time for me, and looking back on it, I just don't know how she managed to accomplish that feat, considering the challenges she faced to keep the bills paid and our household running smoothly. My mornings and evenings and weekends revolved around my mom, and they were filled with fun. Baking banana bread, decorating the house for the holidays, calling up my gram, playing cards, turning an errand or a visit to a friend into an adventure, and singing along to the radio in the car on the way home. came to hundreds of my baseball games and watched thousands of hours of sports with me. And even though she probably still doesn't quite understand that a foul tip into the catcher's mitt for a third strike is still a strikeout, she always shouts out, "He ticked it! He ticked it!" I just want to crawl under a rock with her. It always made me feel important that she came to so many of my games, and it always made me beam when I'd call home from college on a Sunday to learn that she was home watching the Patriots game by herself and was excited to talk about it with me. My parents both held the line and were strict in terms of rules. But when my mom actually grew really upset with me, I knew I'd really screwed up. Those moments created the most important and lasting lessons for me because it wounded me to know that something I did had hurt her. My mom has taught me that love is more important than money. She taught me to be an unabashed idealist. She taught me to have faith and confidence in myself. She taught me to forgive people their flaws. She taught me hard work and financial restraint. She taught me that life is good and family is vitality, and the day we're living in is a good day. I love spending time with her, hearing her big, genuine laugh, and just talking about day-to-day stuff that comes up in our lives. Now, at the stage of parenting that I'm experiencing right now, my kids dominate my life so thoroughly, as most of you have witnessed firsthand, that it's impossible to imagine what it will be like when they leave home. I really don't like to think about it at all because it's really sad to imagine how lonely the empty house will someday be. Although I do have to admit that there are those days when having kids grown up and out of the house sounds pretty appealing. And as an example, last week Luke actually vomited directly into my beer. Not a spit up, actual vomit. But nonetheless, I'm terrified by the thought of these beautiful and exhausting kids of mine leaving home at some point and possibly disappearing out of my life for days or even weeks at a time. Here's the thing about parents that you have to understand. We fall hopelessly, tragically in love with you, even though we know you're going to leave us someday. From what I understand, by the time most kids reach middle school, they don't really want to hang out with their parents anymore. And if that's true, it means I only have a few more years of Gavin, Luke, and Zoe being genuinely excited to have me around. And by high school, many kids think, on some level at least, that they don't really need their families so much anymore, because they're all grown up now. As Mr. Mulligan likes to joke with admissions families, whether or not they go to boarding school, all kids go away for high school. But when you get older, you realize how foolish and immature this attitude is. Our families are our love, our support, our history, our rudder, and the people to whom we owe by far the most gratitude. I urge you to try this exercise that I've just gone through sometime. Sit down for quite a while and think about the people you love the most, who often are the ones you take for granted the most. Write down the reasons you love them. Prioritize those reasons in terms of how important they are to you, and then call them. Call them early and often. Call them when you don't really have time to talk and when you do. Call them for big and important conversations, but also for little and stupid reasons. Don't worry about the fact that the conversation might go for a long time, because when you call them often, you can sometimes talk for only 5 minutes, and that's okay. Emails and texts are great. Your parents will gladly take them, but nothing replaces a phone call or Skype. I mean, honestly, if your parents had their preference, they'd be here with you in person, asking questions in all your classes, shouting encouragements from the sidelines during every sports practice, offering constructive criticism on all your social interactions. Doesn't this all sound fun? But since you go to boarding school and they can't do those things, they'll gladly settle for a phone call instead, which sounds to me like a pretty good deal. Saying thank you for everything and I love you to the people you care about is extremely valuable and important, but your sincerity can only come through if you call home often. I meant every word I said earlier about my mom and dad, but going forward, if I don't back that up on the level of our personal interactions, this talk about how much I love them will prove to be nothing more than empty showmanship. The good news is that each of you carries around with you the best and most convenient communication device in the history of the planet, as my wife and Mr. St. George have pointed out in recent weeks. Something that only 15 years ago was pure science fiction. But considering how often parents ask me, will you please tell my son he needs to call his father, coupled with the quantity of time you all seem to happily spend on such scintillating intellectual pursuits as U-titrate and Flappy Bird, It seems that given 20 minutes of free time, quite a few of you choose to use your smartphones for just about anything other than calling your parents. This past week, I took an informal survey of several Thatcher families to get a sense of how often you call home. You should be afraid right now. Obviously, I'm not going to share the identities of any of the families involved here, and I'll confess that my survey suffered from response bias, but I think you'll nonetheless find the results pretty interesting. Exactly half of the families in question responded somewhat positively, in different range. Some saying my child does a great job of calling me, and others saying, not bad, once a week or once every 2 weeks. But then, a full 50% of respondents reported that their kids very rarely, if ever, called home at all. Here are a few excerpts from those emails. Brace yourself for a serious dose of mother guilt and just pray that none of these Quote, in regards to how often my kid calls home, never! A text now and then for money or supplies. Quote, I have to force the issue to get him to call home usually, end quote. Quote, calling home has always been an issue. Last year I was absolutely distraught. But this year I'm not so distraught because my expectations are so much lower than it's not likely to happen unless they want or need something, e.g. money. Quote, I have had 3 calls since September. End quote. This next response has been edited for content. Quote, if I'm lucky, my son calls me every 2 weeks. Sadly, only when he needs something do I get more charm when contacted. Frankly, my son needs his kicked so he can be more genuinely and regularly communicative with his mom. I feel compartmentalized. Mom serves a purpose and is not an integrated part of my life communication-wise, and that feels disrespectful when he rarely checks in. It feels manipulative when he does check in if he needs something. End quote. I think I touched a nerve. I'm telling you all this with the specific design of trying to make you feel a bit guilty, in the hopes that you'll then feel inspired to think more about the people you love and to act on those thoughts. Every single one of you has people in your life that helped you to get here. Those people probably did far more for you than you can account for. Personally, it's important to me to be a good son, a better son than I am right now. I know I owe my parents far more than I can ever imagine, and the least that I can do is call them. But at the risk of appearing either insincere or holier than thou, and even though, as I've said several times now, calling home is the best way to express your love for your family, I figure a bit of public praise can't exactly hurt. I've got the perfect opportunity this morning because a couple months ago, on a whim, I filled out an application involving a couple of essays, a personal interview, and a few minutes on custom ink, with the purpose of submitting my parents' names for consideration for a pretty prestigious award. I thought it was a shot in the dark, but I gave it my best, and now I'm very happy to announce that I got word last week that my mother and father were picked as the national winners of this award, so Mom and Dad, you need to come on down. Competition are Lila Alina Snyder and Mark Williams Snyder.